Welcome, welcome, welcome to start the year off right with parents using spaces. And Melody is the perfect person to talk about this. If you're not following her on Twitter, you can see the Twitter handle is on the screen because she is posting such good stuff about we need to, include our parents and things and get along with our parents and be on the same side as our parents. So I cannot wait for this session. I am Dr. Desiree Alexander. I am the founder, CEO of Educator Alexander Consulting. You can see all of the great ways you can contact me right here. If you're watching us on the YouTube channel, right underneath the video, you will see the resource for today. So definitely click on the details underneath the video and get that link. So what do we have coming up next weekend? We have special education and beyond. This is one that I've said, everyone should come to because we need to all understand how to be inclusive of all of our students. So definitely come. And you see that we're talking about laws and IEPs and meetings and collaboration and inclusion. And so definitely show up to this one. And then we have that same day, a little bit later in the day, we have me presenting for the Everyone Academy in Morocco on increasing your EdTech footprint and influence. When you go to register for this one, you'll see that it says something about $2. It's only that, I think it's, I don't know, whatever it says, but it's only that if you want a certificate. So it is completely free. So keep that in mind. And then we have Google and You updates to use in this school year, September 24th. So definitely come to that. I know we have a lot of people already registered for this. So you want to make sure that you get your spot before it fills up. Children of single parents, our overlooked stakeholders, will be Saturday, October 8th. Then we have TCCA. Woo woo. If you've never been here, you want it. It's just so much fun. It's a one-day conference. It's the largest conference in Texas that is a one-day conference. October 22nd. So come and check that out. So much fun. All kinds of vendors and just kind of down home. Not like, you know who I am, like not that kind of conference, right? Like just down home, come and learn some stuff. Love it. One of my favorites. Then we have me organizing your professional projects. So we're going to be talking about how do you get organized if you want to do all of these awesome things like conferences and books and school programs and trainings. How do you get yourself organized? So we'll be talking about that. And then we have 3 tools with endless possibilities with the lovely Rochelle. And then she's going to be doing double time and coming back and talking about AI in education. Are they going to take over? I don't know. They may. So AI in education. She may have some knowledge, y'all. We may need to come and see what's going to happen in the future. And then we have TCEA, which is next year, January 30th through February 2nd, but they've already released. So these are the sessions so far that I am doing there. So yay for TCEA. And then we always have our self-paced online courses that you can get into. A lot of them are dealing with test prep for either like Google or educational leadership tests, all that kind of good stuff. Or you can schedule support time with me. So there you go. And then here we go. Tell me what you want to learn in 2023. These webinars will continue to come at least once a month because I know my February and I think January gets a little busy. So hopefully we'll have one. But definitely tell us what you want to learn. And then if you want to do one, go to bit.ly/C webinar and tell me what you want to see or what you want to present. We love our presenters. We have about 3 or 4 right now that's being scheduled. Some of them are brand new presenters. Some of them are heavyweight. You see them at big conferences, presenters. So definitely let us know either what you want to learn or what you want to teach. Let us know, let us know, let us know. So what you have come here for is talking about how to get started with your school year, with parents, and with spaces.
Thanks, Doc. And I just got to say, you crack me up. Like, you always make me laugh. You're such a good, I don't know how you do this in the morning. Of course, it's a little bit earlier here. You guys are probably 3 to 4 hours ahead of me, but you guys are amazing. I'm so glad and grateful to see familiar people in the room. And as always, I like my presentations to be conversational. And so if you have something to share, let Dr. Desiree know, and Doc, just stop me whenever somebody has something to share. And I want to hear from you. So starting the year off right with parents. And just in case people actually, they're watching the replay or they couldn't come today and they're watching the replay, some of us are already a month into school, maybe some of us are a week into school. So wherever you are, just know that it is, it's still early. Even if you're a few weeks in, I still think that you can create an amazing year partnering with your parents. So there's always hope. And if you were to watch this like midway through the year, I feel like anything you do to try to build that relationship is always good. It may be a little bit harder, but the things that I offer today are longstanding, they're evergreen, and they go a long way when you're trying to, help your students have optimal learning growth. And you can find this presentation today at bit.ly/spaces parents if you want. And Dr. Desiree she does such a good job of sharing the resources, but if you want this presentation, I hyperlink everything as well. And so just a little about me. I'm a wife, a mother, educator, author. You can find me on every single social media outlet at MJ McCallie Writes. And I just want to clarify. So Twitter is going to be more professional. Instagram is a mix of professional and makeup. And I say that, and I want to say that because we are whole people. And I've actually been on this webinar series with Dr. Alexander, and I've talked about like being a whole person. Like if we want our students and, if we embrace them as whole people, we must also embrace ourselves as whole people. And so if you go to my Instagram, you're going to see a lot of makeup stuff, just saying. And then if you go to my Facebook page, facebook.com/MJ McCallie Writes, again, a mixture, but mostly professional and a little bit more mom stuff in that. So yeah, and I'm also an author of this amazing book by EduMatch Publishing. It's also in Spanish. I don't have my Spanish version because the last one I had, I gave it away. I'm always giving away. I need to carry more. So yeah, this is a great story. And if you want me to come speak with your class, I do that for free. So just hit me up. All right. And one of the things that, I wanted to talk about today is, all of these roles. I think it's good for all of us to acknowledge the roles that we have. Each role that we have in life is so important. It contributes to ourselves as whole people, but it also contributes to the perspective that we bring to the classroom. Some of you that are watching are also have some of these same roles, and that really does shape our perspective. And sometimes it's good, and sometimes it kind of keeps some blinders on. So we're going to talk about that today. And I normally talk about like, this is what we're going to talk about, but you already know what I'm going to talk about. And so I want to set this up, the foundation of why it's so important. And I love this article by Marco Longmore. He's actually a global educator and he works in China, but this quote from him, that parent-teacher relationships are more than an optional classroom benefit. I would have to say though, in our country, in the United States, I really do feel like people think that it's optional. And I love that you guys are here with me today. And I wish there were more, but I hope that, some people listen to the replay, because when I talk with educators, a lot of times I get more people that are just like, they just kind of are indifferent about parents and the relationship with parents and how important it is when you think about student growth and learning. And so I just feel, and I've always felt this even when I was younger and probably, when I was green, let's say, I always just felt like this bond was very important. And so I love what this Marco guy says. He says they are key for helping students on a personal and classroom level reach their academic potential. When parents are engaged in their children's school lives, students have the home support and knowledge they need to not only finish their assignments, but also develop a lifelong love of learning. Because we model, the most important thing that as parents that we can do for our kids is model what we'd like for them to adopt and as they grow up. I think about reading. I love reading, and I can tell my kids to read and they resist me, but when they see me read, they know how important reading is for me. And I love reading. I mostly love reading romance novels, honestly. Some of you may know that about me. It's the best escape. But reading, I read all sorts of books, but I think if my kids look back, they know that I'm not just telling them to read for reading's sake. Like, it really helps me as a person. Everything does. When we model the relationships, how important it is with parents in the classroom, our students see like, wow, I have a story, and I was going to share this a little bit later, but and actually Rochelle is in the room, and she has a book that I contributed to. I had this little guy that I was having a hard time with. Really, he was just wrecking my lessons. He was wrecking my classroom. He was wrecking how I felt. I just, that school year in particular, my husband had just had quadruple bypass surgery. I had a 7-month-old baby. I was just, and that was just my youngest. Like, we have 5 kids together. My husband wasn't able to work. We were barely making ends meet. I was an emotional wreck. And I remember this little, I was also teaching a new grade level, and this little first grader, I just felt like he was not just wrecking my classroom and my teaching, he was wrecking my life, because I just wasn't prepared. And I couldn't get a hold of his mom. And a miracle upon miracles, I didn't give up. I finally was able to reach his mom. And we had a really good talk. And this was after weeks of trying to reach her. And I'll get more into the story later. But he came up to me one day and he said, "Are you and my mom friends?" And honestly, I was not friends with his mom. I didn't think she would consider me a friend, but I just said to him, "Yeah, I think your mom is really cool." And that was it. That's all he needed. And it completely changed. He wasn't like a perfect student. He wasn't an angel, but he listened and he tried, and things got dramatically different. And it really did change the trajectory of his school year. And of course, it made our relationship with his mom so much better. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But really, I just believe that this is not optional. I think that while relationships are easier for some people, like, I really do feel like I naturally form relationships with people, and it might be a little bit easier for me just because of the way that I am programmed. I still think that we can all do this to the best of our abilities, regardless of how easy it is. I do think that we will see benefits to this in our students, their academic growth. And I have actually seen that every single year that I've been in the classroom. So, and if there's any comments, you want to stop me, just let me know, because this is such good discussion. So, and I kind of want to address, the elephant in the room before we go on. There are, if you look on social media, you're going to find memes like laughing at parents, from the educator point of view. You're going to find memes of parents demeaning educators. If you listen to the news, you're going to see some very crazy political figures doing things, getting parents in an uproar, their followers, right, against teachers. And you're going to see a lot of things that just feel harmful and toxic, and they are. And it may feel like that's the absolute truth, but it's not always the absolute truth. And then I also think that we bring our own bad experiences. When I've talked with educators, for the reasons that, they don't like to welcome parents into their classroom, or they don't really feel like having a relationship with parents is important. A lot of times it's from just one bad experience. After one bad experience, many have given up. Maybe it's after a few. Maybe, you've tried and tried and tried, and you have those bad experiences. Maybe nobody's backed you up, not your leadership at school, and you just feel like you've been stepped on. I mean, all of these are very valid. And I do think that there is a very toxic culture when it comes to this us versus them. And I think as educators, we always need to be on the side of parents, that regardless of what the news is saying, what political figures are saying, what we see on social media, and even against our bad experiences, I feel like striving to have that parental relationship, the family relationship connected to your students is so important. And I also think as parents that we should strive to always be on board with teachers, as like it's a two-way thing. I'm just happening to talk with educators today, but I would say the same thing to parents. Like, it is our job to get on board. We don't have to be best friends with parents, and parents don't have to be best friends with teachers, but we do have to come across as being together for the sake of our children and students. So I just kind of wanted to address the elephant in the room, because I know that not everybody thinks like me. And I do feel like our culture has created this us versus them and mentality. And so I want to speak about that. So today we are actually, oh, I forgot. I wanted to know, this is where I do want to hear responses. Why did you decide to come today? I want to know, like, if this is something that you already feel like you're cultivating well, or maybe you want to know more about. I just kind of want to know how y'all are feeling about this topic. And if you want to raise your hand and then Dr. Desiree can, let you speak, or however you want to do this. Or we could share in the chat. Look in the chat. Okay, so Gail says, I need to help students and get parents involved. Lisa, it's a concept I teach in ECE classes to teachers in grad school. Okay, awesome. Am I missing anybody's comments?
Lisa also said not just biological parents raise children. For example, my Nick, I moved in night before he was born. He's now a tall 8th grader. And that you're right, you must relate before you educate.
Mm-hmm. And I love that. And you're right. And I usually say parents and guardians. So I need to be very mindful of that, because we are not always, talking with the biological parents. We might be talking to grandparents, aunts and uncles, foster parents. So yes, I want to be as inclusive as possible. And so thank you guys so much for coming. I really do appreciate that you're here, and I hope that you can take away some nuggets, and also feel free to share your expertise as well. I never feel like I'm the sage on the stage. I think that's a terrible way to teach and to learn. So you can stop me at any time.
So Teresa also says, I am the student support coordinator for our school system. I'm looking for ideas to help me get parents more involved.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. This is wonderful. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is seeing parents as whole people. I usually talk about seeing children as whole people, or students as whole people, but I want to talk about parents and families and family members, foster parents, all of them as whole people. And then that first contact is so important. Having hard conversations, and how Spaces, who I do work for, I'm the events and community person, the liaison for Spaces. And I was talking with Dr. Desiree earlier. I did not seek to be in the ed tech realm. It's just that I have found ed tech that has been very beneficial to help with the objectives that I have as an educator. And developing the whole child and all of these things, contacting parents. So I really feel like when you find ed tech that helps you do this well, then that's what I love about ed tech. So that's why I'm going to talk about Spaces, and that's going to be closer to the end. All right. So when we talk about, parents as whole people, I think when I was a little bit younger, and maybe before I became a parent myself, I used to think that, like, I knew everything I was supposed to know about a child when they came into my classroom. And I would never say this out loud, but I'm sharing with you what I really thought in my mind. When parents or, guardians made poor decisions, which I thought were poor decisions, in my mind, I judged them pretty harshly. I would have never said anything out loud. I was in a conversation earlier with some of my PLN who have children in the school system, and some educators, they do share the stuff out loud. They will just say, your kid is making my job harder. I mean, you have seen it all. And maybe I didn't say it out loud, but I was definitely guilty of thinking it. Your child is making my life harder, my job harder. And actually, you parent, you're making my life harder too. And you're not making good decisions. I think these were definitely thoughts that I had in my mind. And when I got a little bit older and maybe a little bit more wise, I realized that I cared about my students, no matter what they did, no matter what the mistakes they made. But light bulb moment, their parents care way more than I do. They birthed these kids, or they adopted these kids, or they're taking care of these kids' basic needs. Whatever they're doing, they care even more about these children than I do. So how dare I harbor these thoughts, because I only had these students for, 9-10 months of the school year. Their parents and families had them for the rest of their life, or the rest, they're just going to be with them always. mine is just a tiny little minute in time. And so I started thinking about, like, why do parents make the decisions that they do, even when I consider them bad? And then it's so much easier now as an actual parent. There's just so much going on in the world. I saw an article earlier this week on Twitter and it really made me mad. And I don't know if I can say pissed, but I'm going to say pissed because that describes it. Pissed me off. Okay. It talked about how parents don't care how their kids are behind in their learning gaps from the pandemic. And I'm like, and I read the article and it was from Harvard and it threw out some statistics. And I'm like, first of all, how dare people assume, I don't care what survey these parents took, no data is ever going to tell me that parents don't care about where their kids stand. And we are throwing out terrible words like learning gaps, or, learning gaps is real. I'm sorry, terrible words about, what is that, missing learning where they should be? Oh my gosh, now that I'm talking about it, it eludes me. But, like, where they don't learn, where they're supposed to be in third grade, they're not on level. So this was talking about how they've lost, learning loss. Oh my gosh, sorry, it took me a year to get to that. Took me a year to get to learning loss. I absolutely hate hearing about learning loss. And this article was talking about how parents just don't care. They feel like their kids are going to be fine. And I thought, first of all, that's a really terrible judgment to make, that parents don't care. Don't ever say that. Don't ever say that parents don't care. It's just a terrible thing. When you're trying to get parents on your side, saying that is the first deterrent. Number two, parents do care, but parents are also whole people. They are working jobs. They probably have multiple children. They've got all these needs. They have their own needs along with raising kids. So there's just so much more. And when we talk about learning loss, I think a lot of you will agree that you can't lose what you didn't have. We're still trying to push standards on students they never got. They may be in ninth grade and, the pandemic happened. And so they may not be in a typical pre-pandemic ninth grade level. We're still trying to push that system on them when it doesn't fit. And I think that parents see this too. I don't think they're dumb at all. And they're just like, you know what? These people, our kids are going to be okay. We're going to help them as much as we can. And so I just wanted to put that out there because, a culture, again, we create that culture. And sometimes we forget and we don't keep in mind that parents are not just parents. They are people, they are workers. They are trying to make a living. They have their own feelings, their own problems, their own issues. They have their own experiences that have been shaped by school. Whether growing up in a school system that was hard on them, that persecuted them, or whether they've been, getting principal calls for their kids since their kid was in pre-K. All of these experiences are shaping how they feel about school. And so that is a huge obstacle if it's in the negative side, when we're trying to get them onto our side. And so, but remembering this is one key element. And so, and something I also talked about with my PLN this morning, because they are all advocates of their kids. We have so many kids with neurodivergent skills, whether they have ADHD, whether they're on the spectrum of autism, whatever they bring to the table, whether they're just a typical student, that we would say, neurotypical. We need parents and guardians to be their children's biggest advocate. And I know that if you've been in the school system for any amount of time, you know that you've sat in IEP meetings where parents do not feel at all like they are their children's biggest advocate. They're sitting there clueless. And if they do have something to say, they're usually feeling too intimidated to share it. I always felt that it was my job to empower parents, to know that they actually had the biggest say on the direction of their students, even if it went against what the educators in the room were saying. And I don't think that all parents know that, or guardians know that. They need to be their children's biggest advocate, because that's how they help get what their kids need. And this kind of goes back to thinking as well. Later on in my career, when I started talking with parents, especially with students who had behavior issues, and I always had a lot of students with issues, with some 504 plan or behavior plan. that was just, I just accepted it, to be honest with you. I didn't fight it. It just was what it was. And as I got a little bit wiser in my career, I stopped trying to be the one that made like all the solutions. I started asking parents, what are you doing at home? What are you doing at home that I can implement in school so that I can partner with you, that we can bridge this? Sometimes parents already were doing stuff that was great. Sometimes parents were clueless. It was just like a meeting of the minds. They were clueless. They're like, I want to ask you that because I don't know. What can I do? And so we really did form that partnership. And it really doesn't matter if they're neurodivergent or neurotypical, like having that partnership with your students, parents, and guardians really can create that bridge that we need. And whenever a child messes up, because everybody's going to make mistakes. When you call that parent and contact them or text with that parent, whatever, communication thing you have set up, always asking them, hey, like, how do you feel about this? What would you like to see as part of, the path of, redirection, instead of making it 100% punitive? Like, what can we do to really make this problem or this mistake turn into something they can learn from? And so getting our parents and guardians on board helps them, it trains them to be their children's biggest advocate. And I don't agree that parents should have like the final say. I remember I had a parent conference. This, it was set up the way that it should be. This parent was very angry with me. And I wasn't sure why she was angry with me. I think she was angry just with our whole fifth grade team. And I told the principal, my boss, I was like, I'm not going to let her boss me around. And she's not going to tell me what I'm going to do in my classroom, because I was very confident that I had made decisions that were the best for her child. I was definitely willing to hear what she had to say, but I wasn't going to probably change my mind. I was surely not going to be bossed around by her. I told my boss what I was going to say, and my boss said, okay. She said, I will back you up. If this parent has a problem with what you say, I will definitely back you up. And we don't all have principals like that or bosses like that. I will say that I didn't always have bosses like that, but that was an amazing act of support. Fast forward to the parent conference, and she thought she was being her child's advocate, and she did have a loud voice, but she was also trying to bully me, making a decision for her child that she thought was the best, because she was not looking at the whole entire class. And so I did explain to her why I had made the decision that I had made regarding her child. And I said, she said some things. There was also another fifth grade teacher with me who was a first year teacher. She tried to really intimidate that teacher. So I let her know that we were only here for the best interest of her child, that the things that she was saying to us were abusive. And honestly, I should have just called the office and said, you need to send somebody to get this parent. But I felt like I could still talk with her, and it did work out, I will say. But now I would never let somebody even yell at me or say anything like that. Then I just was trying to be a peacemaker. It did work out, but I said, we're not going to change our minds. You don't see the whole picture. Your child is not going to be harmed by this decision. And she said, well, I'm going to talk to the principal. And I said, and that is fine. That is your right. My principal is going to say already what I am saying. And indeed, she did talk to the principal, and everything worked out because the principal backed me up. Now, I loved and respected that this parent was being the advocate for her child, but she was doing it in a very wrong way. She was trying to boss me around and bully me. And she wasn't respecting who I was, that I was the teacher. And I was never going to let a parent, have the last say. And I was supported. It was like this story was like in the best case scenario, right? She did end up coming back to me like a couple weeks later at an assembly that we had. She apologized to me and she said, your boss, the principal, she did back you up. She really respects you. And I never had a problem with her again that school year. So I don't know, I just feel like we can advocate for ourselves, and we can allow parents to advocate for their students, and we can also help them to see that how they go about it can be different. And I do think that I had an impact on her. So that's why I share this story. But the truth is that we are just with students for a relatively short amount of time. Training our parents to be their children's biggest advocate is something that's going to be lifelong for them. I had a student in the 5th grade who was diagnosed as special ed for different reasons as a 5th grader. What had happened was teachers previous had failed to complete all the steps to the paperwork. Like they hadn't even had made sure that his eyes got tested. Like they couldn't, they couldn't keep going on to see if he had any learning disabilities until that one little thing about getting his eyes tested. And that had been for 2 years before, that had been something that they were waiting on. And when I got his paperwork, I was just like, oh my gosh, like this 5th grader, we've wasted so much time. He has fallen behind the cracks. I probably said that wrong, but I felt sick for him. And so I had a conference with his mother and I told her, I just, told her that like, we got to get his eyes tested, we have just so that we can move on. Like he needs help. He needs support. And so they went ahead and got their eyes tested. He qualified for support services and he started actually making some small growth, even though this happened like it all finally came down to the middle of the year. So he finally got services because you know how long it takes for everything to happen, right? So from the middle of the year to the end of the year. Now he didn't pass his state tests or anything, but he definitely made growth while he was in my classroom. And at the end of the year, I talked with his mother because she had sat through her first meetings, RTI, IEP, all of that. And I wanted to let her know, I'm not going to be with you or your son next year. But I am worried because he's gone so long without these services. I am worried that you are going to be intimidated and not speak up. But you can call these meetings at any time. You don't have to wait until they schedule them for you at the end of the year, because where I was teaching in the school district, they did it every year. Like it was in the spring. I didn't want her to wait till spring for her to find out what his middle school experience was like. And I was afraid she wouldn't speak up. So I tried to, to coach her. And honestly, she thanked me. I don't know that I ever heard from them again. He did have a little brother, so I saw him, but they never really shared about their experience. He seemed happy, but I just feel like this is something that we as teachers and educators can do, is help our parents become their children's biggest advocate in the ways that are going to make change. If parents are going to yell and scream at us, we're not going to listen. We're going to get defensive. Those of us that maybe can wade through all of that stuff and see that really it's just a hurting parent, a very scared parent, that is something that I try to see. It's a skill that, can be developed, but I definitely think it's necessary. And I probably talked a little bit too long. Does anybody have anything they want to share? And I'm going to take a drink of
have a
coffee.
question.
Yes.
What should you do when someone starts to yell at you?
Right. I honestly believe that when a parent loses control, that you should call the office and have them escorted out. I just don't think that anything that we ever do should allow us to be abused. And I felt like when I was younger, I didn't know that. Like I was, yelled at by several parents, even though I wasn't doing anything that was causing that. It was on them. And I do not think that we should sit through being yelled at. And then from then on, we should only meet with that parent with, another teacher or an administrator. So, and I've done that. And I've had parents that, I taught 4th and 5th grade for most of my years. And by the time that I had some parents, that had already been established. So I didn't always meet with parents for the first time without somebody else. And so that's actually good. That's a good thing that a school can do. Not all schools will do that. But if they have a history of kind of going berserk, then they need to always, and that's kind of our job to find out too. We'll talk about that in a second about having a clean slate, yeah, I'll get there when I get there, but I hope that answers the question. And so I want to think about too, and I would love to hear anybody's response. What could be barriers keeping parents and guardians from being engaged with their kids' school? And I would just like to hear it, what you guys think. Or in the chat. I'll look at the chat.
So Lisa says fear.
Fear from like their own previous experience, definitely, or fear that they're not going to be heard. There's so much fear. A lot of times, yeah, people that have gone through the school system themselves as students, they were never listened to. They were like, whenever they shared, they were told that that's not right. That's not how it was. And especially with, you know, our people, our students of color, our parents of color, they're going to have those experiences, I think, more than like, you know, our white parents, probably, honestly. I hope it's okay that I just said that. Time, definitely. Especially when you think about all of our students that live in the poverty level and parents are working more than one job, both parents are working. Yeah. They are fearful of standing up for their rights. Agreed. And they may not even know their rights, you know. Then you have like politicians saying, you know, like demanding that they do things that are even, I think, unethical and go against, like, everybody has rights, right? And they should never be to hold anybody else down. And so I think our culture right now is kind of doing that, and it's wrong. But definitely work, time, just previous experience. So thank you for sharing. And the purpose I asked this is because, you know, just sometimes we don't think about that because we're not looking at parents as whole people, and we're not thinking about all the needs that they have just as a person. We have our own needs. And I think also as educators, we're so used to, I've had a boss that said, when you're in my school, you're a teacher first. Everything at home doesn't matter. And I said to my boss, I'm like, that is complete BS. No, that's not how it works. I am a family person first. My kids come first. I will leave this to go take care of anything that they need, and you would too. And I'm sorry, I'm not a superhuman where I can put everything, but I think that we are expected. And she just said she said out loud what we already know that sometimes our employers want us to do, right? And that's very unhealthy and very toxic. And so I think sometimes we get in that mindset that when we're in the school, that we are just teachers, like everything personal about our lives is out the door. And I think sometimes we expect that when we think about students and parents too, like all we see them as students in our classroom, and parents or guardians of our students. We don't see them in the role and the picture that they play in life, to the detriment of the relationship. Okay. Is there a question? Desiree, are you saying that to me?
No, continue.
Okay, awesome. Okay. And so something that was very successful for me is just making sure that my first contact with parents was positive. I didn't always, for the last few years, I always called my parents. I made sure that I had a contact with the parents, like within the first 2 weeks of school. But if you're listening and you're like, 2 weeks of school has already passed, that's okay. Like, you know, just use the time that you have now. I would set like 5 calls after school a day, or like 3 calls in my planning period until I met my goal. And so you'd have to find what works for you. The reason that first contact matters is, you know, like if you're calling 3 months into the school year and the first time you talk with the parent is about something punitive, they are not going to be on your side. They might not even pick up the phone, especially if their child is a repeat offender for whatever, you know. They're not going to pick up the phone. They're not going to respect you. They're not going to work with you. I mean, most cases, some would. I don't know how everybody reacts, but it makes a huge difference. When you talk with them first, just to say, hey, I'm so-and-so, your child's teacher, then, you know, and maybe say something personal that you like about them. You know, I like their attitude. They're funny. You know, they always have a smile when they come into class, or, you know, maybe you have to lie a little bit. I enjoy them being in my class. Maybe you don't even know them well enough yet. It doesn't matter. Just saying something with good purpose and something that is welcoming. And I know that a lot of people do this with emails, but I just do not think that emails are effective, because when teachers email parents, they're not just emailing them to say, hey, I'm your kid's I'm your child's teacher, they usually send like paragraphs and paragraphs. I mean, that's been my experience. And honestly, like who has time to read long emails? I don't have time to read long emails, and I try, but I don't even read long blog posts, like I want the meat. So I think first contact should always be teacher initiated with a purpose that is positive. And I hate to say this, but just lie if you have to, because it's not really a bad lie. Like, I'm just saying, say, I'm so glad. Maybe you don't know the child yet, but you can say, hey, I'm so glad that Arthur is in my classroom this year. And if that is a lie that is bad, then call me bad. I don't care. I just think that you need to create a contact. Now, if you are in elementary and you're putting kids in cars in the car line and you see a student's parent, hey, I'm so glad Arthur is in my class. It's good to see your face. Count that as contact. That's a great first contact, because I think person-to-person contact is the best. And I think I even put that on my next slide. So like, the car line, a phone call can be any grade level. If you're in secondary and you are outside with your students, maybe for the first couple of weeks you do that. Like you have to do whatever works for you. I know my kids are in middle school and their teachers are all out. And so I do get to see their teachers, and I do get to see the administrators. So, however it works for you. It could be meet the teacher night. And when you get older students, you're going to have less and less parents come. But I would say that if you do get parents that come, make sure that they see a friendly face and your first contact with them is positive. You're so glad that their student is in your class. I mean, that just goes a long way. And if you can smile and just have a genuine spirit about you, then they're going to see, oh my gosh, they're going to remember you. And I think now that I have middle schoolers, remembering all the teachers is quite hard, but the ones that make an impact and go out of their way to make my kid feel successful in class, when my kids actually talk, and my kids do talk about their teachers, that always makes me feel like my kids are in a safe place, and I'm in and I'm definitely going to volunteer. I'm going to work with these teachers. And another thing, it's kind of funny whenever you see your students or parents in public places, but I've always worked and lived in the same community. And so it happened often for me. And when I worked with younger students, they're like, oh my gosh, like she doesn't live at school. You know what I mean? Like they associate you with school. No, I don't live at school, and I will see you at Walmart. And if that is the first time that you see a parent and it's at the beginning of the school year, check it off. I mean, I literally had a list of all my students, and I would check off whenever I met their parents. I would make a list of it. And it really was just paper for the first part. I think I had a doc, like a Google Doc at the end, but like it doesn't have to be techie or anything, just a checklist. And I know that I taught elementary, so I know that this gets harder the more, the older that your students are, but I still think that it's doable. And even if you can't get every single one of your students, like meet their parents, strive to as many as you can. And if you know that there's a student that you see that may seem at risk for whatever reason, maybe they have, an IEP with them, maybe they just seem to have behavior things, especially those students, reach out to parents and make a positive phone call, make a positive phone call, make an effort to really meet them in a positive way before it ever escalates into something else, because we're going to talk about hard conversations. And if you don't have this foundation set first, then those hard conversations that come up later, man, they're just, you multiply the challenge infinitely. And if there's any type of first contacts that you have that I haven't listed, yes, I want to say I taught middle school and high school. You need to do this. I love that. A Google Voice number, so your personal number is kept a little safer. Yes. And actually, Spaces has a way to keep your number safe as well. And you always need to document parent communication. Agreed. And when I first started teaching in the early 2000s, I don't think that documentation was important as it is now. Now, just because of the climate and the culture that we live in, we definitely want to document that. And you can even document whether it was positive or negative. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And I also think that boundaries, I think calling parents from a school phone rather than your own personal phone is also keeping, like, you don't have to have the highest technology. If you just call from the school phone, of course, sometimes that keeps parents from picking up. We know the truth. Like, they see the school number on there, they don't want to pick up, but that's also just a healthy boundary if you don't want people to have your cell number. And so, yeah, we'll talk about the hard conversation. So I kind of talked about my student earlier, and actually I wrote about him. Rochelle, if you're still here, I wrote about him in one of her books, and like, true story. So the last year that I was in public school, I taught first grade, and the first 2 weeks were a dream, even though it was challenging because I'd never taught first grade before. I really liked the change. And I just thought, teaching something new was fun. And my first graders loved to sing more than I didn't have to like be goofy or anything. Like, they just wanted to sing with me. And for me, that's a big thing. I sing a lot. And I thought, wow, I did have a couple of students that, I knew that they were boys, and I knew, actually, and I had a couple of girls as well. They were mischievous, and I knew that I was going to have to really keep on them, but nothing that I couldn't handle. Like, I thought, my fourth and fifth graders were much worse and much more difficult. This is kind of nothing. I just need to make sure that these kiddos stay on track, keep in a good relationship with their parents. And I'd already established that. I'd already called all the parents. I really thought I could do this, third, like the end of the second or third week, like it was within a month. The student comes in, and I meet his dad. He drops off his student like maybe 30 minutes after school started. And his dad wouldn't make eye contact with me. And I thought, that's kind of weird. And I'm just going to call this student Jay. And the first thing that he did when he sat down, because we were having circle time, he like spun on his head right there. Like, it was really strange. Like, Jay's behaviors were just really strange to me for a new student. And he was in first grade. And I found out he had just turned 6. And if you've ever taught first grade, your students are mostly turning 7, but he had just turned 6 2 weeks before school started. So I was like, oh, okay, this is a young first grader. And then we take our first bathroom break, and he starts beating his head against a cement wall. And I'm like, okay, like, something is up with this child. And then by the end of the second day or the first day, whenever it was, he had torn up my classroom. All of these wonderful things that I had created. Like, I had a pretty Pinterest looking classroom for me, my level of what I can do. I'm not a great decorator. And I was mad. I was just like, what in the world? And I tried to call his mom, and, it's too late to make that positive contact. Like, this kid was wrecking my room. Now, I will say that when I was trying to call his mom, I wasn't going to tell her everything. I really thought I should just try to make a positive contact with her before I tell her everything. This was kind of, maybe that's a little warped thinking, but I needed this mom. I thought, how can I make sure that we're working together? But anyway, it didn't matter because I couldn't get this mom for nothing. For like 3 weeks, I called like every day. Mom never picked up. I emailed mom with the email I had. I used everything that I could. I asked the office. We didn't have his paperwork. We didn't have his file. I was like, he came from another school in our district. What is up with this? So I got the counselor involved. And the counselor, it took about 2 weeks before she could get mom on the phone. She tried to talk with the other school that he had gone to, and they had nothing but the worst things that you could ever talk about a child and a parent. They went so far as to say the mother was drug addicted. Like, they said some pretty heinous things about her. I didn't know her, so I didn't know what to believe. And they said that this child had spent most of the last school year, which kindergarten, okay, and he had just turned 5 before kindergarten. So again, he was a young kindergartner in the office. And I'm like, what? He spent his kindergarten year? Like, oh my God, this kid is so behind because nobody worked with him. They just kept him out of the classroom. And he was a neighborhood kid for a gifted and talented school. Like, that other kids that weren't living in the neighborhood had to get lottery to win lottery to get in. And so I don't think that this school, I think he was just forgotten, honestly. The way that they talked about him, the way that they obviously treated him, they had no real documentation on it. I mean, I think it was illegal, and I was so angry. And I couldn't believe that they let a little 5-year-old stay in the principal's office for most of the school year. Like that just seemed horrible to me. I don't care. Um, so our counselor was finally able to reach the mom, and I finally got that parent conference with her, that first contact with her. And I did not know what to expect. At this point, this child had tried to escape. I mean, it was terrible. He was so far behind. I could already see like he was nowhere near reading level or anything. And so when I went into this conference with the mother, I thought, I'm not going to do a lot of talking. I am going to listen to her because I needed to know. And you could tell when I first met her, she looked frightened. She was so nervous. She was shaking. She was a young mom and she did not want to be there. I mean, it was really a miracle that she was there. Our counselor just worked magic, and I did listen. And honestly, after I heard her talk about her life experiences, how the school that her child went to, how she was so hopeful for her son. Like she knew that he was going to this magnet school, and that he was lucky because he lived in the neighborhood of the school. Like she had such high hopes and she had such terrible experiences and they treated her. I mean, I listened to what she said and what they told me and what she told me. I mean, I wanted to burst into tears. I felt sick for this mom. And this is her first child. She has a child younger than her oldest. And these are her first experiences with public school. And I just felt sick. And so when it was my turn to talk, I didn't talk about anything that he did like that. I just told her that I was so glad that she was there. I was so glad that we could finally meet, that I was so sorry for her experiences that she'd had, and that I promised her that, I would do anything that I could to help Jay, um, grow and learn, and that I would work with her and that I wasn't going to treat her like she didn't matter, that I knew that what she had to offer was valid and the most important thing that would help me to educate her son. And man, it was just that was probably the hardest parent conference that I've ever had, that I didn't know what to expect. And I've had some really crazy parent conferences, but this one was emotionally hard to accept. And just to know that people that were my colleagues and peers in the same district, the way that they treated this mother, it was horrible. And so now you can see why it was so hard for her. She didn't want to pick up the phone. She was trying to survive. She didn't have a lot of support, at home with her husband. Like it was her driving everything. And that was the next day. Like I think we even hugged, like she and I, we had a good, she still has my number. She still gives me updates about Jay. This is, 4 years later. And anyway, that was the next day. Jay came up to me with a smile on his face and he said, "So are you and my mom friends now?" And I was just like, "Yeah, we're friends," and I don't know that she considered me a friend, but I knew that it was important to him because he loved his mom and he'd seen how his mom was treated too. He'd seen how he was treated and how his mom was treated. And it made such a difference. And, testing first graders reading, that was something we did. We did formally. We did it all the time in small groups, but formally we did it at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and at the end of the year. And I will say that this young man made amazing growth. He didn't make the growth that the state said they wanted him to make, but knowing where he came from, and just the way that he acted in small groups after that, like he was really trying. He has learning disabilities. I think that, because I had so many students that actually did make growth, and for him to make not as much growth, like there were things that I was able to see. And then I was also able to help his mom see and help her to become an advocate for him, where she felt like her voice was going to be listened to. And her experience with school changed after that too. And she thanked us. She loved coming to school after that. She didn't feel like we were all against her, and she knew that we were doing our very best to help her son. It really changed dramatically after that, the partnership that we had with her. So that was my story, of just how, even kids as young as first grade, they see how we treat their parents and how important it is for them. So it matters. And then that was not the first, that was not the last time that I had meetings with this mom. I did have to talk to her about like reading at home. I had to talk to her when he would get in trouble in other classes that were things that he did. He stopped destroying my classroom, and he stopped trying to run from my classroom after that, but he still had some issues that we had to address, and I had to have those conversations with mom, and so that we could find a way that we are bridging, problem solving, how to help him best and how to learn from these mistakes. And that was something. Another thing I remember one year when I was teaching fifth grade, I had a student with ADHD, and his mother was amazing. Like, she tried to not just, it wasn't just about like the medication, it was about counseling. She was really trying hard. She was a single mom. And there was one day that I lost my patience with this student, and I yelled at him, and not proud at all how I treated him. And I had a parent conference, like it was parent conference time that night. And I just felt sick about like looking at her face to face, knowing that I had yelled at her child earlier that day. And so and he was there, he came, and I don't know if it's common when I was growing up, I never went to parent conferences, but where I taught, the last school district that I taught, it was very common for students to come with their parents, which was awesome because then I was able to start doing student-led conferences, but that's a whole other thing. So I had to look at this woman knowing that I had screamed at her kid earlier that day. And so I just want you to know, when we have hard conversations, sometimes it's because we've messed up as well, and you can come back from this. And I just started the parent conference with, I don't know what, T has shared with you today, but I really need to tell you that I lost my patience, that I yelled at him, and I want to apologize to him, and I want to apologize to you, because, when we hurt people, they are attached to people that love them. When we hurt our students, and then they, the parents that are attached to them also hurt. And so I wanted to make sure that she understood and that he understood that I knew that I was wrong, that really the situation did not require me losing my cool, and that I just apologized. And she said, and this is kind of typical, I think, of students with ADHD. Some of them forget, like they don't harbor that anger that a lot of other people might, because they've already gone on to something else. And honestly, I think he was really used to being yelled at all the time. And she was pretty hard on him too. I mean, so I think in his mind, he just thought, well, my teacher's yelling at me, it always happens, whatever. He had not shared that with mom. And so she said to me, she said, I'm really hard on him too, but I actually appreciate that you are apologizing. I appreciate that you shared this with me, because even though I don't like it, it makes me trust you more. And I just thought, wow, like, talk about coming back from a really terrible experience, from a mistake that I felt was really terrible, for her to say, I trust you because you apologize and you took ownership of it. And we come back into that modeling part of it, and just having hard conversations and being genuine and trying to make it right. I just don't think you can go wrong when you build a foundation of trust, and a foundation where parents know that you care about their students. Like, even when you make mistakes, it doesn't kill the relationship. And I know that we've all been a part of relationships. Like, the first time something goes wrong, people cut you off. It doesn't matter if it's in the workplace or like a personal, like, we don't always know how to navigate those hard conversations or those tricky parts of relationships. But when we set that foundation of trust, we can come back from it. I'm going to look at the comments and see if there's any. I think sending cards to their home instead of a phone call. I think actually sending cards is a very nice gesture. And I remember, like, before my kids went into middle school this year, their principal actually wrote a postcard to them. I think it's good and I think it's helpful, but I think that does more for maybe the student. I think with parents, I think it's more beneficial to have that phone conversation or face-to-face meeting. Yeah. And I don't think that cards are bad or anything. I just think that, like, junk mail, like anything, they can be discarded very easily or forgotten. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. And anything that you do to establish that good and positive foundation is great. So send the postcards, but also have a contact with that parent. And it may take you, like if you've got 100+ students, it may take you longer than 2 weeks. It may take you the entire first month of school, the entire first 2 months of school, knowing that you're juggling a lot of other things. The thing is that I would start with the students that you already know are going to need more support. Start with those students, because if you're going to have conversations with their parents more often in the school year, you definitely want to cement that foundation that they can trust you and that you have the best. Oh, I'm sorry. So sorry, John. All right. Having those hard conversations, just making sure that you're apologizing. Sometimes you have to talk with parents about discipline. Sometimes you have to request help, making sure that you're a bridge, and you're asking your parents for advice. Like, you're not the end all know all. And then, of course, you have to talk to parents about grades a lot of times. And so these can be very hard conversations. But so having these conversations, they're all a part of our school year. We definitely have to do that. I just want to say that sometimes, like I said in the other story, apologizing, we're not beyond apologizing when we've done wrong. We also model that for our students. We are going to have discipline no matter if we are on good terms with our parents. There's always going to be these issues that arise. And again, asking for help from parents is a great way to make that bridge from home, from school to home, and make that partnership sturdy. And I think the hard conversations should always be face-to-face or phone call, Zoom or virtual. I really do not think that hard conversations are ever beneficial in text or email. So I would just say, like, Spaces is great, and I'll show you how Spaces is going to help when we get to that. Anyway, but when you're having these hard conversations, if text and email are the only way that you can actually get a parent to be a part of a conversation, then I would say maybe I shouldn't say never, but I think the best practice is always to make sure that you can try to do it by phone or face to face somehow, because there is so much can be misinterpreted in text and email. And so it's a lot easier to send the good news through text and email. And I think that that is a great thing to do, sharing pictures. But yeah, if you want to have those hard conversations, you don't want anybody to misinterpret what you're trying to say. And sometimes people automatically get defensive and they interpret some of the, and they automatically negative. How do you organize the conversation so you can write down what they say? For example, where do you write what they said so you don't forget? Gail, that's a great question. And you can just keep a notebook. If you want to keep a notebook of these conversations and just like a tiny little paragraph, put the date, put the type of contact that you had, and then just write a little blurb about it. You can also start a document like, a Google Doc for a student and just keep it in a folder so that, like if you have to share that with your boss, if you have to go back into the history for whatever reason, that you have something there. And also if you have a lot of students, if you don't document it, you won't always remember every single communication. That is just, we have so much we're juggling. It's easy to forget like what you ate, let alone how many people you talked with. So I'm gonna keep on going. And I want to say that this kind of goes with any relationships, whether we're talking about personal or professional, or students, parents, anything. So many of us are programmed to keep the peace and not confront anything. When in reality, having hard conversations means that you care. When you are ghosted, it is so painful to be ghosted. And I mean, I'm married and I haven't dated in a long time. But previous to being married, before ghosted was even a term, I will say that I know how that feels. And I know that we could feel ghosted by like social media, like our friends, even on social media, or parents can ghost us. And sometimes parents ghost the whole school because they're just so tired of all the negative stuff. They never hear anything positive and they don't feel like it's ever going to change. So they can't even deal. And I've had parents like that. I have felt that way. And I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I'm in my 40s now. I can say that I've been on both sides. I've made my own amount of mistakes. And I wish I could go back and change those. But if anything, don't avoid them, because it just shows everybody in that relationship that you care. If you're willing to show up, work through it, it means that you are there, right? That you are there for them. And that you truly care. Okay. Confrontation doesn't mean you hate people. I feel like that's kind of the message that we always get, like, well, I'm non-confrontational, or I really avoid confrontation. I get that. Like my husband, we're the exact opposite. Like I am like head first into confrontation because I want to get it solved. And he's like, he really watches and watches and watches and waits before he says anything. And it kind of aggravates both of us. He hates it that I go first, head first, and I hate it that he doesn't say anything. So I get it. I also think that confrontation, like it doesn't solve everything the first time you talk about it. Like you're going to have to sometimes, if something is really traumatic, if something traumatic happens in your classroom or, you know, in any relationship, you're going to have to talk about it a lot, maybe even with a therapist. Like it doesn't mean that just because you have one hard conversation that it's solved. But I also believe that when you're training your parents to be advocates, like a lot of them come from a place of they're trying to avoid, they're just trying to survive. They don't want any more drama, you know? And you know, hard conversations don't have to be so dramatic. Talking the truth and just being real with people doesn't have to be like a dramatic, you know, where somebody gets angry and somebody cries. Like if you can actually model that and be very even keeled, like I really care about your kid, you know, like, and I want you to know that I care about your kid. And, you know, I see that they are struggle in this area and they're probably going to struggle in this area forever, or, you know, for as long as they're in school. What can we do as the people who want to advocate for this young person? What can we do together to make sure that this student gets the needs met that they have? And also, again, I talk about building bridges a lot because, you know, those hard conversations can often lead to building bridges from school into home. And then I think it can also help people, just your students and your parents, even when they're not in the school setting anymore. It helps us all grow as whole people, how to really deal well with confrontation or having hard conversations. So it's just, it makes us all better. It can resolve turmoil, but not on the first try. Like sometimes we think, oh, we're just going to get closure this one time. I truly don't think that there's really such thing as closure. I believe more in healing than closure. And I believe in forgiveness more than closure. And I believe that when you own your mistakes, that people trust you more, that you're going to be honest about it. So that's why I advocate don't avoid the hard conversations. And you may be the first time that a parent and a student have had a healthy way to deal with whatever they need that they have, whatever issue that they're struggling with. You may be the first contact. I know as a fifth grade teacher, my students, if they started in pre-K, that was already their 6th year, I know that sometimes I was, and I'm not trying to brag on myself about that at all. I really am not. I don't know that all of us are equipped to be able to have hard conversations. But sometimes you might be a high school teacher and you might be the first time that they have a healthy conversation of dealing with whatever issue. So kudos to you for doing that. Now we're kind of getting into like the tech part of it. Okay. And so again, I've always liked tech, but it wasn't my driving force. Like if tech cannot help me forge on with relationships, then I don't want it. You know, if it doesn't help me meet the needs, the social emotional needs of my students and my parents and myself, if it doesn't help me keep boundaries, I just do not want it. Okay. So that's why I love Spaces. I think that it does all of these things. The way that it can help is it provides meaningful feedback for students and for parents. And the way that I'm going to show you how it's set up, when we provide meaningful feedback, we're growing our students, and the positive exchanges that we have with our students goes a long way with how we are able to relate with their parents. If our students and ourselves, if we have positive relationships with them, that also is a part of the relationship with the parent, because we know when we hurt somebody, it hurts the people they love. It's like a ripple effect. The same thing goes for positivity. When we are lifting up and empowering our students, our parents, that ripple effect is also going for them. And again, you may be the first teacher that a student has, that a parent has, that is the awesome example of what it's like to help a student grow through a powerful relationship. And meaningful feedback does that. Another thing that Spaces can do is, you know, showcase student learning and growth. Because when we keep Spaces a platform that keeps the parents involved, it showcases what the students are doing. So the parent knows what's happening to the point that they want to know. Sometimes, we can't force them to want to know more than what is happening, but they can also see their student growing. And when you see your kid growing in something, I mean, that's the best feeling. I've taught my own kids and I've struggled. And when I see when I see my youngest right now, she's in school, she's second grade, her learning how to read. I have just I watched her struggle with it to now she's just taking on more. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that empowers me as a parent, right? Inviting families into your classroom. Sometimes it has to be a virtual invitation. Spaces can help you virtually invite. I will say that I think inviting parents to come and share expertise is one of the best things that you can do too as a teacher, and beyond career day. You can do it during career day, but if you sprinkle that career day throughout the year, so that parents are kind of if you feel like you can welcome them, if it's something that your school does, because I know things have changed, but allowing parents to be a part of your classroom experience in some ways, finding ways to invite them. But then you have parents that they just can't because of their work schedule, but virtually allowing them to be a part of your classroom sometimes is also beneficial. Spaces can also foster that conversation. You can have a 2-way, 3-way conversation. Again, when this is something, I used to use Class Dojo a lot, and I do like Class Dojo for this reason, but here's where it went wrong. I would only use Class Dojo to have positive conversations with parents. If something was negative, I would never text or email, because again, anything can be misconstrued between text and type. And it can be misconstrued between the students and the parents. And, Spaces allows for you to have conversations all the way around, which is amazing. But when it's time to have those hard conversations, I believe in any way, have a Zoom. If you can't have a phone or a face-to-face, a Zoom is a great way as well. You definitely don't want anybody to misinterpret and have any misconceptions that will be hurtful. And I'm the worst. When people text me, sometimes I read it completely wrong. And if I feel like they're feeling upset in any way, I really take it hard. So, and then I just call them. They hate it. They're like, why are you calling me? I'm like, well, because I think you're mad at me. So if there's any chance for that, and I did see these texts back and forth on the dojo where we ended up having to keep the parent from being able to communicate anymore on that. They had to be off. And I do agree that if a parent abuses, they're yelling or screaming, even in text, and you know what that looks like, all caps, F words, all of that. They have no right to do that to a teacher. You do not have to see that over and over. Texting somebody is so painful. If you have to it's one thing hearing it over and over in your mind, when you have to see it over, it's even worse, I think. So if you don't want that to happen, don't do the negative stuff over text, because it will blow up in your face. And a lot of times that happens because, we can be afraid to call parents. If we've had a bad experience with parents, it keeps us from wanting to pick up the phone and call them. Even if it was not that parent that we had an experience with, we felt we were bullied or abused by a parent in our past. It just makes it harder to have a positive relationship with other parents. I get that. But I've seen it snowball in a bad way. But I do think Spaces also honors boundaries because it's teacher controlled. And I'm going to show you that now. If you have, I'm going to put this in the chat really quick. If you want this presentation, Dr. Desiree Alexander, she's amazing. I gave her all the resources, but all of these are hyperlinked as well. So here is a blog that my teammate wrote, 5 ways to improve. And it kind of just goes around a lot of the stuff that I talked about, just, from her. And it just reiterates that parent communication is so important. But I think that this is actually a great place to start, especially if you want to share this with colleagues or whatever. It's a great blog. But now I'm actually going to go into, and you can see my screen. Can you see the Spaces webpage?
Yes.
Okay, great. So sometimes I have it already pulled up, and a lot of times I'm going to invite you to a classroom that I already have in Spaces, but I'm not doing that today, because that gets really confusing. And So I just kind of want to show you from ground up how to start this. So this is Spaces is a platform where you can upload learning, and you go to spacesedu.com, okay? And you're going to see that we celebrate learning wherever it happens, and that we're very family oriented. We never want parents to feel surprised about any sort of thing that is happening, like if they're not making progress. One of the best things that I love about this is you can include parents for whatever works in your classroom. So let's say you want to sign up, you'll hit the sign up button, but I'm going to go ahead and log in because I already have a Spaces class. I have a lot of them actually. And then you just, I'm going to do, okay, just log in. QR code login is one of our new features. Logging in through Google is just the best way for me to do this. So, but you would, if you've not signed up with Spaces, you would need to go through the whole sign up thing first. All right. And so, I'm just going to, like, this is what it looks like when, like, if you're a secondary teacher, you might have like a class for every single period that you teach, and you just go to this blue button, add class, and you would, that's how you would go. You would just create it and everything like that. It's pretty, and in the resources that Dr. Desiree Alexander just, and I have to say Dr. Desiree Alexander, because if I don't, I'll say Dr. Educator Alexander. So that's just a way to, anyway. But I put all of the things, like there's videos on how to add everything. So if you want all the nitty gritty on that, okay. So here is the class that I just it's just a sample class. And you can see right here, it's just a sample class. That's why it only has 4 students, 1 family member, and 2 teachers. Okay. And I love this because it has so many, stakeholders involved. And so here we go. What you're looking at is the teacher dashboard, but this is also the class feed. So right here, and this is a student. River is a student, and River posted, and you can see the teacher responded to this. Now, how are family involved? So we want to go to our Spaces, okay? And in our class space, it says that students can see and are active. Students can post to the space. They can also see each other's content, but interaction is limited. And then you look over here at family. The space is currently hidden. Families can't see the space. When I talked about boundaries earlier, so you would have to go with like what your district and what your school, what they consider to be like within their priorities and safety, but you can actually make a family active here. So if you want your family to see what the class sees so that they are up on what you're doing in your class, this is a great way. You can make it visible. You can actually, family can comment on their own students' posts. So if I made this visible and I put this toggle over, River's family can now post something to River. When she posted about struggling in math, and you just save it, and it tells you everything that you're doing. So like when a teacher creates a post and selects multiple students, all teacher and student comments will be visible to everyone on the post, including family. So you can change that, or you can go back and make it hidden. So now River, her parents can actually comment on this as well. Since no other, students were involved in this, no other parents can comment on this, but the teacher's commenting, and now the parent can as well. And there's so much more to like the Spaces platform, like, tagging curriculum and everything like that. I'm not going into that today because this is solely focused on like how to be, how to support parents. But like, if you've never been introduced to Spaces before and you're like, what in the world am I looking at? Don't worry, I will come to that as well. And now individual spaces. And if you want to, like, I'm going to go ahead and turn off. My principal doesn't want family to be, I'm going to go ahead and make that hidden. I just don't think it's appropriate for all of my parents to see what's going on with the whole class. It's up to you as the teacher to make that whatever is comfortable for you in your class. The individual spaces that you can have, I think these are the best places to have family connected. And so you know, everything is very user friendly. Of course, I want my students, I want them to be visible, and I want them to be active. So active means that they can actively participate. I'm going to save it. And I'm also, the individual spaces, the only people that can see an individual space is the student and the teacher. So whatever is said in the individual space is only seen between that particular student and the teacher. But if you make it visible, and then you want them to comment on it, and this is up to you as a teacher. You have the control. Maybe you want them to see what's going on, but you don't want them to comment. That is up to you. And this may change throughout the year after you, maybe some students, you want their families to be able to comment on it because you know that you've established that bridge and that relationship and that partnership, you know, has to be there. So you can change that. And maybe you don't want them to comment on it at the beginning of the year because you want them to see what you're actually doing. It's up to you and how you run your class. The thing I love about this is that you can have relationships with parents and still have control of what is going on in your class. I think that boundaries are wonderful things and keep relationships healthy. So you do whatever you feel is comfortable for you, but whatever you decide, I agree that the individual space is the best place to have families connected. So all of your students will be over here. And so whenever Cameron says something, or I, create this dialogue between Cameron and myself, it will not be seen by the rest of the students. It'll only be between Cameron and myself. And since I allowed the family to see this, now Cameron's family will also be able to talk about whatever we're being posted in this individual space. And the way that we can connect parents is always you go to the people tab. When you're in spaces, you want to be able to see how it says students, family, and teachers. So your family will probably be the last to invite. And if you're in the spaces, if you think, well, Melody says spaces is pretty amazing, I'm going to try this out, but you can't remember everything that Melody says, and you don't have time to go back to this 2-hour webinar. Everything is in spaces right for you. It talks about the privacy kit. It gives you prompts. It tells you everything that you need to know, but I also think it's very user friendly. So you are just putting in the email of the family member, and that is how they are connected. It's a lot like Class Dojo, to be honest with you, when you're connecting. And right now, I will say that the best thing is the messages. And I love the options of messages. And again, we're not having the hard conversations in here. I do think I love spaces, but I love parents and students so much more. Okay, so I want to tell you about my favorite EdTech tool right now, but I also want to say that when I'm advocating for parents and students, that the relationship with them is so much more important, and having the hard conversations is probably not something you're going to have in the messages. And I say that because I made such a thing about that conversation, but positive conversations are very easy to have. So that's why I don't spend a lot of time on that. But let's say you decide, again, as the teacher, what kind of messages you want to have. Do you want students and families to be a part of this? And for older students, I think it's great, because I think the more stakeholders that you have involved, the better it's going to be. And let's face it, a lot of our high school students, or even our middle school students, they know how to forge their parents' signature because their parents are too busy with something else. And honestly, I knew my parents' signature. I forged my mom's signature all the time. My mom was working. My parents were divorced when I was in high school. And, I knew I needed something to get done. I did it. Shoot. It just was what it was at the time. But if I needed a permission slip form, I had to do that myself. Okay. So anyway, it goes to students and families, or just your family. Maybe you just want the parents and guardians, or the active adult in somebody's life. You just want to give them, or maybe you're just trying to get a message to your students. You could talk to your students in the class feed, in an individual space, in a group space. And we haven't talked about the group space. And today I'm not really going to, because it doesn't really have much to do with talking with family. But again, the reason why I want to tell you this is because it's up to you. The control is up to you. And I think there's so many times in our fields in education where we feel like everybody else is making the decisions for us of what we have to do, yet we're the experts of our own classroom and of our own students. And I love this platform because you get to you get to decide how it works best for you. And these sending these messages, they are a lot like text messages. If you, so, oh my gosh, this is what you can actually send messages and turn off the comments. So if you just wanted your parents to know what's going on, hey, look for this, but you don't want anybody answering back, you can keep this, or you can toggle it on so that they can reply to you. So that is something, again, it's part of the control that you have, and you may need to have a healthy foundation with these parents first before you want their comments. And I say this because I know in the real world that it can be a very toxic place. Right now, you kind of have to work at that relationship. And the really cool thing is when you're sending these messages, just like I chose the students and families, you've got these creation tools. So you can send a voice message to them. You can, I don't know that it'll let me do it right now. It says camera not found because I'm on a Zoom call, but you can actually record a video of yourself or take a picture of yourself. You know, you can upload a file, or I'm sorry, this is a link. You can upload a link if you wanted to share with your students and families, or you could actually upload a file. So there's so many ways that you could share a message with your families. You get to decide if you want them to respond or not, or if it's going to be a one-way, two-way, or three-way conversation. And again, we're talking about positive things here, keeping parents and students up with what's going on. If I hadn't gotten a message last Monday night from one of my eighth graders, teachers, she had a project due when she came back on Tuesday. And I was so upset, but so grateful. I mean, yeah, it was 9 o'clock at night and we were working on her project. We were working on it, you know, because I wanted her to go to school with her project. And anyway, but again, I was so grateful for the updates. And this is something that I did in my classroom a lot. I would keep parents involved with what's going on, and parents get to decide on their end as well. Like, I would always ask at the parents at the beginning of the year too, just take a survey. Do you like to be texted? Do you like to be called? Or do you like to be emailed? And I would try to notify parents on the choice that was actually going to get them, you know, because especially for those students that I was going to, it was required that I needed to be in contact with their parents a lot more. I needed to know what was the best way to reach them. That was how I was going to reach them. And if text was the best way and I needed to talk to them, I would text them. We need to talk. Hey, how are you? We need to talk. And it worked. You know, it was hard at first. For some of the parents that you're really, I think that parent relationships for the most part was a natural thing for me. I don't know how it's been for you, but I felt like it was always a very positive. I've talked a lot about how hard it can be with, you know, your students that have different needs and maybe some more challenging needs, because honestly, that's the relationship that's going to matter the most. Those are, I believe that, you know, every child deserves like our attention and, you know, empowerment, especially when they are facing more challenges, because, you know, equality and that, you know, isn't going to get them where they need to be. It's equity, you know? And so some students have more challenges. And so they, you know, we're going to be talking with their parents more, because to meet the needs that they have, it just requires that. It just requires a little bit more. And so I speak to that. So that is, you know, I love this again. And then these are the way that you can kind of keep in touch with parents. Now, if you're like, Melody, I want to text, you know, like this other app texts. Well, the thing about, I also love about Spaces, and I'm going to go to their homepage, is that they want to hear from you. I do work for Spaces, and I can tell you that we talk about what teachers want, what they want, what's important to them. So if you go all the way down on this homepage, you can see how teachers are using Spaces. You can see our privacy, and then you can also go to our roadmap. Let's see. So we're going to go to the roadmap right here. It says product roadmap. And it's going to tell you about the different things that are coming out. Like we just had a whole bunch of different, oh, these are the next. So we just launched some amazing resources that are now part of the platform. Oh my gosh, and I never told you that Spaces is free for teachers, by the way. Spaces is free for teachers. So when you sign up, this is for free for you, okay? We just came out with these different things. So if you're standards-based grading or competency-based grading teacher, boom, we got proficiency skills. But look, submit an idea. We love the ideas. We talk about the ideas that teachers want to have. And the more teachers that submit an idea, the faster it goes on the roadmap. And if it wasn't like a priority on the roadmap, it becomes the more people that say, hey, like I want text. I don't want just like, well, I don't want just an email to go to my parents. I need text. All of that, like we'll incorporate that, they'll put that on our product roadmap. So I just want you to know that if you see something on Spaces that you like Spaces, but you need something a little bit more, we want your ideas to be better. And I love working with Spaces because we really do elevate educators and we listen to educators and we honor what educators bring. And this is not something I planned on talking about, but if you spend any amount of time talking with our product manager about how to improve, they'll send you a gift card. They honor your feedback. So anyway, I'm going to get back to my, So that's kind of like that in a nutshell. If you actually are like, I've never heard, oh wait, okay, now I'm jumping, I'm sorry. Well, I'm going to go to this last slide. Okay, and then I'll go back to that, okay? If you've never heard of Spaces, this is your first, meeting with Spaces. Again, in my, this is linked. You can go to spacesedu.com. You can sign up for free as a teacher. And then if you want to know more, I also put the link to this drop-in webinar because this coming week, we are going to have a webinar just about how to get started. So join the First Class with Spaces webinar to set up your Spaces. That's coming this week. So if you're like, wait a minute, I love this platform. I want to know more about it. Then just, go to this webinar. I put the link in there and actually I can copy and paste this link and put it in the chat if you want to sign up. Boom. Okay. So don't feel like I'm leaving you in the lurch. I promise you I am not. It's just that I focused a little bit more on the parenting part of it because I do consider myself an advocate for parents and teachers. And so all that to say is before, I know you might have questions. My best advice to you, if you're trying to have more parental involvement in your class, or you want to give a message to student teachers or whatever, is that the best thing that we can do for parents is allow them to have a clean slate. I have had parents in my classroom that have had terrible reputations. Remember how the teachers from the previous years, they want to tell you before school starts all about this one student, or every time they can get your attention, they want to talk about this one student that they had that wrecked their whole school year. And you're just like, please don't tell me that. You want to give your student a clean slate. Well, parents need clean slates as well. It doesn't mean if they have a history of yelling at teachers and being crazy, it doesn't mean that you don't implement boundaries that work. It just means that you consider that they have best interests at heart and that you give them a chance to advocate for their student and talk with you before assuming that they're going to berate you and be asshole. Okay. That's all that a clean slate is. And if you are a wonderful human, maybe you can do this. Maybe you can forgive. If they prove themselves to be otherwise, maybe you can give them a clean slate every time you talk with them. I don't know that that's healthy. Don't be a pushover. I don't advocate for that. Just at the beginning of the year, especially, give them a clean slate. But if you have a hard conversation and you work through it, I think that would be a healthy way to give them a clean slate as well, within boundaries. They have to have, you're only going to talk with them in one type of way. There's always going to be somebody looking over. If you're emailing, you're also going to CC your administrator. If you're going to meet with them, your administrator has to be there. And I have worked within these boundaries and they work. Nobody deserves to be abused. Okay. I would just say share more good than bad. When you have those, challenging students and you have to, I remember there was a mother. I talked with her and I met with her as much as she would allow. She didn't like that. She just really wanted text. Text was her love language. Okay. So I did have to text her sometimes things that were going on because she wouldn't pick up the phone. And I said, I really, really need you to call me. Chris is doing this and we have to talk about this. Okay. So she we would actually end up having a talk about it. But I also made sure that I was sharing good stuff that he did as well. Like, you should have seen Chris today. This is what he did. He won the STEAM challenge in our classroom, and I'm so proud of him. And that is how I went. I tried always to infuse the good because I wanted her to listen when things were tough as well. So share more good than bad. Keep the ask simple when you're communicating with parents. Those long emails, and I say this, I don't know that you do this, but I know that I have been on the recipient of very long emails, and it's just so much. We're all doing 100 million things. Parents are doing 100 million things, even if they're stay-at-home parents. They've got so much going on, health issues, multiple kids, agendas, appointments. Keep your asks simple. If you want something, if you need them to fill out that permission slip and there's a link to it, put the link at the very top and just keep it really simple. They will appreciate you for that. They will like you better for that. And they are more than likely to fulfill your request if you keep it very simple. I've had like texts and things where the link that I was supposed to fill out was, they said, you'll have to go to this and this and this to find the link. And I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I did what they told me to do, but I'm not, like, I'm in marketing at this, like, that's not good marketing. And a lot of our job as educators is marketing. I mean, keep it simple, keep it clear, and then your request will be fulfilled. And just model patience as much as you can. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect. And I am a good teacher. And I do have that 2017 NAACP Educator of the Year. I have that title, and I've got some other accolades in my repertoire, I can put on my resume. But the thing is that I'm still not perfect. That may make somebody feel like I'm somebody worthy of listening to a little bit. I don't know. But people understand what you say and do more, what you do, I guess the actions, right? And they're more likely to respond in a similar way if you can do that. And it's just something that we have to work on, and it's worth working on. Okay. And so this would be, if you wanted to take a screenshot and this is the best thing that you could share with people who are trying to, in a nutshell, trying to build good relationships with parents. Again, if you sign up for spacesedu.com, I would love for you to do that. Sign up for a webinar, and follow me on Twitter, follow Spaces Edu. We love sharing what educators are doing that is showing growth over time. So yeah, and if you want to contribute at all, like if you're like, I have a blog or something like that, just follow us and keep in touch with us. We want to hear back from you. And that's basically the end. And thank you all so much for being a part of this today. Like, it just means so much to me. And I absolutely want to support educators who are really trying to support parents and students.
All right. Thank you so much, Melody, for this awesome webinar. Really, really focused on parents and what we can do to really not just include our parents, but help our parents, work together with our parents. I absolutely love it. So, and you showed us a tech tool that we can use to help with that, which is Spaces. So thank you so much, Melody.
Thank you. I appreciate that you had me on, and I appreciate everybody who came today or is listening to the replay.